everybody, and welcome to the Feminine Principle Podcast, Astrology for Authentic Living. My name is Mel with Energetic Principles.
And I'm Shawna with Neo Feminine Astrology.
And in this episode, we will be discussing the astrology for the week of December 18th, and what we have titled New Soul Direction. The purpose of this podcast is to give inspiration and guidance for this week with real-life examples of what to expect.
The three major aspects that we'll talk about today are the Sun and Saturn conjunct in Capricorn and the winter or summer solstice, depending on where you are in the world. We're calling this The Work Begins. We'll also talk about Venus trine Uranus, which is about wild encounters. And then lastly, super exciting, Mercury station direct, which we're calling Last Stop. So, of course, please remember that some of these aspects will influence you more than others based on what's actually happening in your life right now and your personal astrological makeup. Notice what resonates with you most and always use your intuition and logic to decide what's best for you.
Yes, because you know you best. So yeah, Shawna, let's kick off the week with this a quick rundown of, the moon's path through the zodiac and some other minor aspects for all you astro geeks out there. We start off the week fresh off that new moon in Sagittarius, which we discussed in great detail in our last episode. So if you haven't heard that, feel free to go back. And so our lunar lady is now in her the beginning of her waxing cycle, and she's going to move into disciplined Capricorn on Monday. She remains an earthy Cap until moving into innovative Aquarius midweek, which is late Wednesday, Thursday for some. Then she's going to travel into the Aries zone until moving into the compassionate Pisces on Saturday, where she'll remain through the weekend. Also of note, we have Venus, who's going to be moving into Capricorn on Sunday, December 24th at 9:26 p.m. Pacific time, which is Monday, December 25th at 5:26 a.m. Universal time, and then 3:26 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. So, Shawna, share with us who we're featuring for this week's quotes.
Yeah, so this week features quotes and inspiration from the British Indian poet Nikita Gill. And so if you follow me on Instagram, you know that she's been one of my favorites recently to repost. She has some really beautiful, simple but pretty poetry. And I thought that she was a great symbol for this week because after looking into her story a little bit more, I found out that she received almost 140 rejection letters from publishers. Mm-hmm. But afterwards, her work became incredibly popular on Twitter and Instagram. And she was like, I don't need y'all. I got my own thing going. And so her ambition and devotion and the innovation with using that social media different outlet really make her a great symbol for this week.
Yes, and especially the fact that she never gave up. How Capricorn Saturn is that? Keep on going.
Mm-hmm, exactly. So we are excited to jump into these transits with you all. One last note before we do, we want to give a shout out to our new patrons. Shout out to Baron and A.E. Garcia. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you so much. We definitely appreciate it. So glad to have you on board.
Yeah, and shout out to all of our patrons too. We appreciate you so much. If you are interested in becoming a patron, you can do that to show your appreciation, and then you also get our super cool show notes every single week with all of the details of each episode. And so this includes specific dates of the transits that we talk about, the tarot cards that Mel pulls, the quotes that I select, reflection questions, and the weekly action item. Oh my gosh. If all of that weren't enough, as a complimentary gift, you also get our Astro Basics cheat sheet that has like a nice little rundown of all the signs and the planets and how to make sense of everything if you're not sure what we're talking about at any point.
Yes, it's very helpful.
Definitely. So you get all of that by becoming a patron of the podcast. You can become a patron by going to feminineprinciplepodcast.com feminine.podbean.com, or you can just find out more and connect with us on our Facebook and Instagram under Feminine Principle Podcast.
Yes. And speaking of Facebook, we're going to do another Facebook Live, right, Shawna?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're excited. We've been really enjoying doing these Facebook Live with everyone. It's nice to connect with our peeps. So we will be doing that next on Friday, December 29th at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time, which is 8:30 p.m. Universal time. And yeah, wait.
Do that math.
Did I get that right?
It's confusing. Just so everybody knows, it's so confusing for us sometimes because we do this daylight savings time, and other people don't seem to. So we're just having to remember our calculations as the time changes.
Yeah, so basically it's 12:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Yes, so you do the math and we'll get those specifics to you either later in the broadcast or next week. But that is where we'll be. And I think it's going to be a good one, Shawna. Ring out this year and get ready for the new one. We can do that by going live and talking with all the folks out there and see what you have to say, especially about, what 2018 might have in store. So I think it's going to be fun.
Definitely.
So, all right. So shall we kick into this episode? We got a pretty meaty one, I would say, especially with our first segment here. So let's get in there. So the first segment we're going to talk about is the sun, who's going to be not only moving into Capricorn in what we title, the winter or summer solstice, depending on where you are in the world. So the sun is going to move into Capricorn. Saturn's going to move into Capricorn. And then the sun is going to conjunct Saturn, you guessed it, in Capricorn. And this is what we are titling The Work Begins. So some exacts here. We have, first it'll be Saturn who moves into Capricorn. And that's going to happen on Tuesday, December 19th at 8:48 p.m. Pacific time, which is Wednesday the 20th at 4:48 a.m. Universal time, and then 2:48 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And of course, that happens at 0 degrees Capricorn. Then we have the sun who will move into Capricorn, aka our solstice, and that will be exact on Thursday, December 21st at 8:29 a.m. Pacific time, which is 4:29 p.m. Universal time, and Friday the 22nd at 2:29 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. Once again, 0 degrees Capricorn. And then they're going to meet at 0 degrees Capricorn. Exactly. Not too long after the sun moves into Capricorn. And that will be on Thursday as well, the 21st at 1:09 p.m. Pacific time, which is 9:09 p.m. Universal time. And then Friday the 22nd at 7:09 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. So Shawna, kick us in with your first quote.
So this again is by Nikita Gill. This is from You Are a Survivor. I want you to remember, you are not a broken thing. Instead, you are a human full of incredible and wonderful experience, made of the same things swords and diamonds are made of. You are a survivor, my darling, and I salute you for everything you have been through and for making the universe so proud, so very proud of what you have become. And so I like this particularly for this mashup of Sun and Saturn and Capricorn and the solstice. I like this in particular because it's a reminder that we are strengthened through challenge, and especially the piece about the things that swords and diamonds are made of, that pressure and that sometimes constriction and limitation, that is actually what makes us survivors, and that is what makes us very beautiful. And that is classic Sun, Saturn, classic Capricorn. And then also I feel like this quote has a certain element of being at a threshold that we've come to a certain point with the solstice, and we've come so far and we're ready to take on new challenges as well.
I love it. And you're right, Shawna. It really fits in with especially this time of year and how we are, the solstice has an element of reflection to it as we, usher in a new time of year and a new season. So I think this quote is very apropos. And it's so true, what the limitations within our lives are what really create who we are, because we have to get creative about working around such things. And so then we do become, through that pressure and through that mold of limitation, we become this greater entity because we've had to get creative with ourselves. We've had to survive. We've had to just push on through. And that is really Sun, Saturn and Capricorn, So where do we start? Well, let's start with the solstice, just because, why not? I think it's a good way to start here. So, let's see. I've got a few things to say about solstice, and AKA Yule, as most people might know it as, or might not know it as. You hear that at this time of year, especially with Christmas and stuff. The Yule log and what have you. But solstice itself, and especially winter solstice, here we are talking about the North America, or the Northern Hemisphere. It's also known as Yule, and that's when the dark half of the year essentially relinquishes itself to the light. And we have that darkest night of the year. So I love it, Shawna. It's just I love celebration. Maybe it's the Capricorn moon in me. We love tradition. We love the idea of it's this time of year again. Let's celebrate. What brings us harmony and joy in life, because that's essentially what the solstice is. I think, or that's one facet of it, is that it's a time of celebration. So, what do you think about the solstice, Shawna? Or just any fun things to share about it?
Yeah, so the solstice, little fun fact. So solstice, the word actually means essentially the point where the sun is standing still, because sol is sun, and then I think the stis part is where it's standing still. And it's called the solstice because it's the point where, like you're saying, Mel, the sun has reached to where we have the shortest day in the northern hemisphere, and then the longest day in the southern hemisphere. And so from this point in the northern hemisphere, the days are going to start getting longer. And then in the southern hemisphere, the days are going to start getting shorter. And so it's this pivot point. It's a point where the sun is in the earth, the orientation is shifting. So it's been shifting, and then it's pausing. There's this pause. There's this moment of standing still, or appearing to stand still for a moment, and then a shift in the opposite direction. And so I think this is really interesting because the sun is related to our soul energy at a symbolic level in astrology. The sun represents what it is that we're here to express, our ego identity, our soul ego. And so it may be a point also where we have a certain moment of pause where we reflect on, again, how far we've come, and then do we want to shift directions? Do we want to continue? But it's definitely, to me, I feel like a pause moment, and that's especially emphasized with the somber tones that Capricorn can bring. Yeah, that's what I think about that.
I totally agree with you, because especially in pagan tradition, the whole idea was that we are reflective in the dark night. The purpose of and here I am talking about winter solstice, so bear with me. This is for the northern hemisphere people, but you can apply it for your own winter solstice if you live in the southern hemisphere. But the whole idea is that we kind of are reflective in that dark night, and as we are, as the nights are reaching their apex of longevity, we are getting increasingly more introspective. So that when we get to the solstice point and the sun rises the day after solstice, we know we're on the upswing. We can welcome, the sun as it is about to grow in strength. And to speak on what you were talking about earlier, Shawna, with the whole idea of it being pivot points. I love, there's also an old pagan myth of the idea where there were the Oak King and the Holly King. And the Holly King is the god of the waning year, and the Oak King is the god of the waxing year. So each year, or each twice a year, they battle during the solstice, basically. They have this mythical battle to where in the summer solstice, the Holly King wins and becomes the reigning king of the waning year. And then when it's time for the winter solstice, the Oak King now defeats the Holly King, and it is time to be the god of the waxing year. So I loved how that works. It's, it's like this battle of the sun and the moon, or it's kind of sun and the moon, not really though, it has to do with our ecliptic and all, but the idea just was really sweet to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, as we talk about the differences between the light and the dark, and the different hemispheres, I'm just reminded that really the solstice and the equinoxes as well, but we're talking about the solstice right now. The solstice points are this time of a shift in the light and the dark. And so really it doesn't matter, like, it's all about orientation. And so no matter where we are in the world, we're all having this certain pause point where there's a shift, where there's either more light coming in or more darkness coming in. And darkness, not in a negative way, more light as far as like being able to see things and growth as well. And then darkness is more about like that reflective quality that you're talking about, Mel, where we go inside and we're more calm and still and receptive. And so I think that in each culture and in each part of the world, we develop certain stories and symbolic practices to honor what it is that we're perceiving in front of us. And regardless, whatever it is that we're perceiving, whether it's more light or more dark or et cetera, it's definitely that reflective quality, that stillness. And there's a certain element of sacredness in that, no matter where we are.
Yeah. And the whole reason it's sacred is because, we didn't have no like Apple Watch telling us when solstice was how many years ago. Like people watched the skies and they knew, they felt it like coming, they honored that time of year. And so we still do these things, but we, or at least I hope so, or that's what Shawna and I are trying to share with you, is that this is kind of what this time is for, like this is that dark night to be reflective in a sense, but in a good way. Because even if we talk about sun and moon cycles, how most people, you'd say that the zodiac starts at Aries. So, although some people might you protest that, but for the sake of the example here, we'll say that the zodiac sign starts at Aries, and the whole idea of spring. Well, the solstice is the beginning of winter. And so if we're thinking of moon cycles and we're thinking of winter can be a liken to a new moon, because it's the quietest, it's the most dark, it's we can't see the idea that we can't see the moon. We're not having a new moon per se at the time of solstice, but symbolically speaking, that's the time of year it is. It's this really quiet, dark time where we are beginning to plant those seeds. As we reach the solstice and then the days become longer after that given point, it's almost like we're having this proverbial new moon in a sense through this contact. So, and how perfect, Shawna, it's the end of the year. We're all probably going to be, reflecting on what the year's brought us. We're going to be sharing our joy, hopefully, with the people around us and our families, and just the celebrations that happen at this time of year. And then we're going to start, the year anew, going forward, much like a new moon does, as we begin to wax in this new existence of the year, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And it feels as though there's a certain sense of, because Capricorn is really about, it does have this more somber tone and this more like this very ambitious and kind of like we've titled it, the work begins. It's like there's a sense of gravity of what it is that we're moving towards. It feels important. And I think that is we may feel that on the day of the solstice that it happens, but then also just continuing the whole next month as the sun moves through the sign of Capricorn, where we take our commitments very seriously, I think, in this next month.
Yes. And even beyond that, and this is a great way for us to segue into the fact that Saturn is moving into Capricorn. And so, we're going to have this conjunction, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. We're getting a Capricorn, we're getting an additional Capricorn flavor for the next, a handful of years, 2.5, 3 years. There's retrogrades involved. I believe it retrogrades back into Sagittarius. Yes, next year, early in the next year. But we have Saturn who is moving into Sagittarius. Mercury. Mercury's still going on, people. FYI. So Saturn in Capricorn. So I think the work really does begin in some way, Shawna. Like this, not only do we have the sun there that's going to kind of boost our purpose, in a sense, especially after this reflective, solstice moment, to where we get this conjunction that we're like, okay, I've chewed it over. I've kind of got like an internal vision of what's going on here. We got Mercury, who's about to station direct, which we're talking about much more in the episode. So I think this is really just the starting point, as our title says, like the work begins now. Like we get serious, basically. Capricorn energy. That's what happens.
Yeah. Getting down to business.
Yes.
And I think it's really interesting that we do. So it's two different things that are really happening. To break it apart a little bit is we have Saturn moving from Sagittarius, where it's been for about 2.5 years. Oh my gosh.
Longer than that.
Yeah. 3 years.
2014. Yeah.
Yeah. So Saturn's been in Sagittarius for about 3 years. So it's been there for a minute. And this week it's moving into the sign of Capricorn, which it will be there for about 3 years or so as well. And so the thing with Saturn is it moves slowly. So its effects build slowly over time. So we think of like going to college versus taking a workshop. Like it takes a longer time, and it's more subtle in its effects, but you have a richer, hopefully more deep experience. And so that's happening. But at the same time, we have the sun conjunct Saturn right away. Like it's 0 degrees. It's the very first degree of Capricorn, and the sun is like a trigger. So I'm wondering if right away we may already be feeling kind of like a foreshadowing of what our work is to be with Saturn moving into this different sign of Capricorn, where we may already see like little inklings of things that we're going to be working on.
I definitely think so. When Jupiter moved into Scorpio, however long ago that was now, we're probably a couple months in or something. Mm-hmm. There was some immediate effects that were happening, like the instant Jupiter moved into Scorpio. And I don't think Saturn is going to be any different. We are going to feel that shift. And the fact that the sun and Saturn are conjoin at the time of the shift, I think it's going to not only be a shift, it's going to be like, you can't ignore it, like utterly apparent kind of thing. Like you're just going to feel this sense of seriousness kind of wash over you. And I don't mean that in like any type of scary way, because some people are like, oh my God, seriousness scares me. I like light and airy and buoyant. But the thing is that I really feel like Saturn is here. Saturn is here to help. Especially since we've spent all this time in Sagittarius, figuring out what it is we believe, how we see our big vision in the big picture of our life, and all those Neptune transits where we are tapping into, once again, our dreams and our ideal picture for how we want to live our lives. Well, the only way we're going to get there is through a little work with some, devotion to greater self-discipline, in a sense. And so I think that the sun and Saturn, especially moving into Capricorn, is now we're going to get that oomph to take all that inspiration, all that, just envisioning of what it is we want and actually put it into material plane. But like you said, Shawna, it's not a workshop. We're going for a master's degree here, essentially. But that's, we're going to mature in the process. And that's the whole idea of Saturn and Capricorn, is how can we, limit ourselves, in a way, like a mature limitation, so we can have greater achievement in our life by limiting ourselves, for our greater plan and our greater good at the end of it all. Whew. So yes, that.
Yeah. And I would say to anyone that does feel, like there's something coming. I've already talked to some people who, especially Capricorn people, who have asked me like, hey, I feel there's an opportunity or something, where they already feel this something coming, or there's something brewing, especially in the next year, and, how to pursue that. And I think that I would encourage anyone that has like a shift coming or something new that you're working on, especially, or, maybe something comes, something happens. I would definitely look at things as far as long-term. What's your long-term plan, especially over the next 3 years? Where is it that you want to be? Don't feel like you need to have everything figured out right now, because this is the very beginning of this process, essentially. And so, so it's definitely a time of embracing that limitation, like you're talking about, Mel, where it's like, okay, how can we use limitation and restrictions that we have as a resource instead of just being annoyed about it?
Yeah. Or how can we create them? Like a lot of times we feel like limitation and restriction comes from outside of us, but all us Saturn and Capricorn people will tell you that the best application of that is when you put it into place yourself, so that you can achieve greater things based on your own self-discipline. Because self-discipline is, getting the shit done, essentially. In order to get that done, you have to limit your time. You have to limit your day. You have to prioritize what it is that you're going after, and put restrictions on your own actions, in a sense, so that you can achieve these things. And some people do that with no problem. Like, those people that you're like, how did you do that? Like, how did you even, and then other people can't get a thing done,
Mel, you're like that person that I look at. I'm like, how the hell does she do all of that stuff?
Yeah.
I'm like over here. I'm like, God damn it.
Well, that is part of my fake eulogy, which that's a whole nother topic for another time. But yeah, and so where we're getting to business, and where we're laying down these limitations, and developing a greater self-respect for ourselves too. Because that's the thing with Capricorn and Saturn, is it's like having the respect for yourself enough to be able and to be able to go after the things you want in life, because you deserve it in a sense, and really taking responsibility for your life and your goals. Like, that's the whole idea, is having enough self-respect for yourself to discipline yourself for greater achievement. And where that greater achievement lies is going to really depend on where Capricorn is in your chart. So we're all going to be achieving and, laying down limitations, just like we were while Saturn was in Sagittarius. But now it's moved on. So we're all going to be taking that Saturn energy into a new area of life. And so that just really depends upon your chart of where you're going to feel this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So, and just a quick note too, me being the Capricorn moon, I have to point out some potential negatives to it, especially that we're moving into the first degrees of it. So when we're moving into the first degrees of, especially a long-term transit, things might test us in a way, or, there might be more negative manifestations of stuff that we actually have to push through, and we feel the limit of our own, whatever it is that comes to us. Like say we get all this Capricorn energy, and maybe you get a little touch of depression. Or you get a little touch of, what you have control over in your life and what you don't, control issues, or feelings of shame, not feeling, strong enough to approach things, and having to get over a shame of like feeling you're not good enough about certain things, or dealing with power hungry situations where you're like, I want it all, I'll bulldoze anybody I can to get to my goal. Or just, repression and controlled emotions you might have to deal with too. So just know there's like a lot of positives, I think, to this Saturn moving in Capricorn, especially since it's in its sign of its domicile, where it's the strongest it can be for the most part. But just know, I think in order to tap into that strength, much like your quote, Shawna, is that we have to kind of go through these things first, and we might have to be challenged in a way that creates us, allows us to be swords and diamonds in the end, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree, Mel. I've found, and I do think it depends on a person's chart makeup, and, if Saturn will be making a certain aspect, but yeah, there's always this potential for depression, or not even so much like intense depression, but I've noticed with Saturn, with myself and then people that I've talked to, where there's kind of this sense of hopelessness sometimes that can happen, where it's like, well, it's so overwhelming and what's the point? And that can be hard to get, like, it can be hard to get out of when you're in it. And as much as we can do just to take, in typical Saturn Capricorn fashion, just one step at a time, like what is it that we can do right now? And sometimes right now is like, okay, I need to just get up and go get a cup of coffee, or I need to feed myself or something like that. I think it's good to not downplay the fact that can be an issue, but it's not something that is forever. And so if we are feeling that way, know that it will pass as we take action.
Exactly. And that's the thing, is to learn Saturn's lessons, you have to engage with them. You have to be confronted with them. Like, no one learned anything by not being challenged in some way, like that's just the reality of it.
Spoken like a true Capricorn man.
Yes, it's true. It's so true. And it's nothing to be afraid of. It just makes us stronger. Like, that's the thing, So we have a lot in store for us, I think, for Saturn being in Capricorn. And as we were talking about earlier, it's going to be, roughly a 3-year jaunt. And the highlight of Saturn moving into Capricorn is really going to be when Saturn makes its conjunction with Pluto. And that's going to be on January 12th of 2020. So we have some time for that. But just know that the idea of those two moving together, like, these are big social cycles. These are big world cycles. And so just the fact that Saturn's moving into Capricorn is really playing into the idea of the Saturn-Pluto cycle, which we'll see develop over time, with government and organizations hopefully being broken down and rebirthed into better conditions. So I have a feeling these next 3 years are going to be very interesting, considering just the contacts that Saturn's going to make along the way. But I'm hoping it's going to be very fruitful for us all. And we're going to start with the conjunction, right, Shawna? Because we haven't really even talked about the idea of the conjunction, and how. So basically, Saturn moves in there, the Sun moves in there, and then they conjunct right away at 0 degrees Capricorn. And I love the idea of 0 degrees. If I were to take Witeki's symbolism, 0 degrees has to do with I protect and boundaries, and laying down boundaries of stuff. And who is better at laying down boundaries than a Capricorn? So I feel like this conjunction is really going to allow us to lay down certain things in our life, or we're going to be way more in touch of how we want to limit ourselves or limit our lives in a way that is going to, bring a strong sense of self, because we've put these boundaries around what it is we're going to do. And now we can move forward with hopefully, working through, some strong principles and just the hard work and effort that we can put in, because we've now have laid it down. It's like, okay, this is what I want to do. I'm going to protect it with my box, in a sense. And I'm just going to go for it, And so I feel like this conjunction, and it happens yearly, but I think it's going to put a real pep in our step as far as, what it is that we want to achieve, and how we even look at and how we perceive ourselves in the public and our reputation, and wanting to maybe take that and expand upon that in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the Sun and Saturn conjunct definitely speaks about where it is that we need to or just want to draw boundaries, and how does that drawing boundaries, saying no when we want to say no, saying yes when we want to say yes, and really claiming what it is that is important to us, and how that defines our sense of self and brings a healthy sense of ego, brings strength and awareness to the ego.
Yeah. Let's hope. We're just gonna get serious as a thing. But what are we getting serious about? Let's just get serious here. But let's get serious about these tarot cards, because let's see what I think these add a whole nother flavor, as they normally do, to all our transits here. So I drew the Father of Cups as the focus, and the Nine of Pentacles as the grounding. And I thought this was an interesting combination, especially since we're talking about Saturn. At first I was thrown off a little bit from the Father of Cups, but then it made total sense to me, because the Father of Cups is one that knows how to control his emotions, in a sense. And so this really, to me, taps into Capricorn, because Capricorn, and especially Capricorn moons, we're kind of known for controlling our emotions, almost to a detriment. But sometimes we have to do that in order to make progress in life, because if we let certain emotional hang-ups or, kind of keep us from achieving the goals that we want in life, and being the, self-sufficient, sustained person that the Nine of Pentacles represents, we have to control ourselves and put boundaries around what it is our heart wants to accomplish. And so I think the King of Cups, or the Father of Cups, is really just asking us to maybe balance our emotion without being overwhelmed by it as we start off this Capricorn season, and just feeling out what we want materially for our lives and how to go about getting it. And I think, having that emotional maturity is really what's going to help put us in the right frame of mind in order to at least go forward trying to achieve these things. So what do you think about these two cards together?
Yeah, so the Father of Cups, actually, to me, I think that's very appropriate for especially this combination of Saturn and the Sun being just fresh right into the sign, because the Father of Cups, it is this the keywords are supportive and diplomatic, and to me, there's a certain element of strength, but softness there with the Father of Cups. And so I think that speaks to the fact that we're at 0 degrees Capricorn, that it's there's still this sense of not like naivety, but like there's still this sense of receptivity and newness, and that's supported by the Nine of Pentacles, which is about the celebration that we were talking about. I love the Nine of Pentacles we had last week, actually, for the new moon, and so I think it's very appropriate that we have this card again carrying us through from Sagittarius to Capricorn. So I think it's definitely like a celebration of the support that we have in place, and then the support that we're creating for ourselves.
Yes, I totally agree. Because, the nine really speaks to Capricorn to me as well, because it's the nine taps into life's riches and our material well-being. And this is something that Capricorn strives for, or any earth sign strives for the most part. And really it also reminds us that we are in control of our own situation. And that's really an element of Capricorn that is one that can strengthen us, is that we are in control, and that security comes from with inside, and that's another thing with Capricorn is like security. We need security. We're driven for security. And so knowing these things, it only leads to the fact that self-discipline is our friend. So if we know that we can control certain aspects of our situation, that we are responsible for our own like oomph, that own security, that own like propeller, essentially, and discipline that, and then we can go forward with the things that we want out of life, and really this sense of accomplishment that we're all kind of going to be striving for. So I think with the Father of Cups there is we need kind of emotional wisdom mixed with that sense of security to help us bring out the abundance that we're seeking.
Definitely.
So all right, so some questions to take away here. I would ask myself, as solstice approaches, can I take the time to do some fruitful introspection before the sun rebirths itself anew? What and or who in my life brings great joy and deserves to be celebrated? I would ask, with Saturn entering Capricorn, what areas of my life need greater devotion to self-discipline? What limitations can I put in place for greater achievement? And then lastly, I would ask, now that we are starting a new cycle of accomplishment, can I embrace a newfound emotional maturity in my life to better help my efforts? Can I take control of my situation and move forward with a greater sense of security?
Nice.
So, all right, Shawna, let's move on to our next transit here. And that is Venus, who is going to be trining Uranus, and what we are titling Wild Encounters. And so some exacts on that, that will happen on Wednesday, December 20th at 3:12 p.m. Pacific time, which is 11:12 p.m. Universal time, and Thursday, the 21st at 9:12 a.m. Aussie Eastern time. And that trine is going to happen at 24 degrees Sagittarius and Aries. So Shawna, kick us in with your next quote.
So this again is by Nikita Gill. This is from For the Red Riding Hood Who Was the Wolf. Her mother told her she could grow up to be anything she wanted to be. So she grew up to become the strongest of the strong, the strangest of the strange, the wildest of the wild, the wolf leading the wolves. And so I like this for this particular Venus trine Uranus, because to me, Venus is how it is that we socially interact, but it's also this element of our allure and how other people respond to us as well, and that element of attraction. And when Uranus comes into the mix, there's this certain sense of wildness. Sometimes it can be like wild in a feral kind of way, but usually it's just wild in like, I'm going to be exactly who I want to be in the way that I want to be it. And so this combination I think is really sweet for we can do whatever it is that we want to do, and then we're received, I think, that we're appreciated for that, and that there's some really cool social connections that can come when we embrace that.
Yes. And how perfect is it that this is happening around the time of the solstice and the holidays and all that. And so, I mean, I can only imagine that we'll have lively social events, like if you're at an Xmas party or a work party, holiday party, whatever, it's probably going to be a little wild. People are going to be feeling it. And perhaps there's unexpected guests at whatever you attend to, that could provide opportunities in your life, and so there's this element, like Shawna was saying, like just the unexpected, the sparkle, like things are kind of kicked up, and there's like this brightness in the air, and we're just more in tune with trying, new ways of relating, or getting out there more, or just allowing us to really share who we are and our own originality with other people, like pretty much like letting your freak flag fly in a way, I would think would be the trine to Uranus. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's something, because it is a trine where it comes naturally, and we don't, like sometimes when Venus and Uranus, like if it were square in opposition, there might be a certain challenge or a decision that we need to make. But I think in this case, it is like you're saying, Mel, where we're just, maybe we're out at a party, we're socializing, or we're just out and about in the world, and it feels very natural. And so what I would say about that too, this is just coming to mind, is I've seen a lot of people recently, because we're still in Mercury retrograde, say like, oh, like, should I do this or should I not do that? Basically, I've had a lot of people asking me if they should constrict or restrict themselves from enjoying something good that happens during Mercury retrograde. And so I think that this Venus-Uranus is like a really sweet little gift within the Mercury retrograde process. So I would say, you meet someone cool or interesting, or, like, it's okay to have a good time. It's okay to socialize. And like we were talking last week, check your expectations at the door, but it's okay to enjoy and to have fun.
Yeah. And, and who knows, like the whole idea of Venus and gifts. So you might receive something unexpectedly from, from someone, or just this proverbial gift. And a gift can be anything. A gift can be something material. A gift can be someone who helps you with something. Someone shares a piece of knowledge or wisdom that is in a sense a gift that helps you improve your life in some way. There's many ways that you can receive a gift from another person. But that really could come out right now too, where you just unexpectedly be like, hey, thank you.
Yeah.
But so let's get down to some specs, because that is definitely an element in the air, I think. And there is just going to be kind of that electricity going on. But there's some other things that we should probably consider, just looking at the big picture. And we haven't really talked about the moon at all. And so all the Saturn contacts that we were talking about, and the sun being Saturn, solstice, the conjunction with Saturn, all that was happening, or at least sorry, Mercury's getting me again, FYI. But we were basically mostly spending a lot of this week in a Capricorn moon, on top of the fact. We have our solstice when the moon just moves into Aquarius. But when we have this Venus trine Uranus aspect, the moon is going to be in the late degrees of Capricorn. And the sun is going to be at 29 degrees Sagittarius. So it won't have moved into Capricorn yet, but we're kind of on that tested 29 degree in a way. And the things that are kind of calling out to me are these two things, and I'd like to see what you think about them, Shawna, is the fact that Jupiter has now, who's being disposed by Venus, who is kind of speaking for Venus right now, is actually approaching its exact square with the nodes. So we have a T-square being formed by Jupiter that is kind of challenging certain soul development or soul direction in a way. And then we have Chiron, who is going to be square Venus exactly at that same time. So it's interesting, because we can get you know what I mean? We get that Uranus spark, which can be very good, but I feel like we might need that spark to potentially move through something, if that makes sense. So what do you think?
Yeah, no, that's an interesting combination. Okay, so let's break it down. So Jupiter in Scorpio square the nodes. That to me is about a certain sense of freedom and even like liberation, expansion that can come through digging into things that are uncomfortable to talk about. I think that we've seen that in America for sure, with all of the sex scandals that have been aired out, things that happened a long time ago, where people are finally coming out, women are finally coming out to talk about it. And so like that is something that there is a certain element of freedom and being able to Venus Uranus be free to talk about something and feeling this sense of lightness by sharing something that has been buried very deeply. And so that combined with the fact that Venus will be square Chiron. Chiron is about, it's about the things that hurt us and how it is that we heal from those things. Mm-hmm. And so that has like a similar flavor to me as well. I'm wondering, okay, what is it that we're sharing? What is it that we're upheaving from like the depths of our psyche? What is it that we're processing and kind of like airing out so that we can have not just like freedom from circumstance, but also just internal freedom so that we can not have things that are weighing us down psychologically.
I like that, Shawna, especially the internal freedom, that idea, especially with Uranus involved in Aries, is very much a self process that we are contacting here whenever we're contacting Uranus. So I'm wondering if the square to Chiron, it can be some type of turning point, maybe in misunderstandings, or if you have to clear something up with another person, or if you have a past relationship hurt, maybe we can push past things and face our feelings in some way. And I think that Jupiter might be helping us or challenging us to do that, especially in Scorpio, because Scorpio likes to bury feelings a little deep sometimes, and that's how we get psychosis and psychological patterns in our life, because whatever affects us, our psychology is usually some type of emotion that has not made its way to the surface. Like that's the whole idea of it. Yes. So I'm wondering if we can kind of push past these hurts and kind of face our feelings in a way to where we can grow by them, because Jupiter does want us to grow, and it's squaring the nodes, which is about, our development, where we're going, this kind of North Star type of idea. And so yeah, I think that we might be, because and especially relationships might be going through change right now. Because once again, this Venus is being disposed by Jupiter in Scorpio, who is definitely a proponent of change. So I'm wondering if we can kind of bring these things up, move through them, and then have the lightness and the innovation of that trine, that Venus trine to Uranus, to kind of let us, move through that pain and then lighten it up a bit, or be able to express ourselves and share with other people in a way that we haven't before. Or maybe the pain has been holding us back from being able to act in such a way. So, there's just a couple considerations here. Because at first I was like, ooh, Venus trine Uranus, like that's going to be fun. And then I'm like, ooh, Chiron square Venus, Jupiter square the nodes. I'm like, what's going on here? So yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels. And then on top of that, like you said, the moon will be in Capricorn when this happens. So it definitely feels like a bittersweet kind of sentiment, like where there's like something intense maybe that comes up, and then we work with it, we confront it, and then we feel better afterwards, ideally.
Yeah. And it makes total sense, because here we're talking about the moon in Capricorn. And as Shawna and I have said in previous episodes, transits don't happen right at the moment that we're like exact at this. Like it's a buildup. And so I'd be willing to bet that we're going to feel the buildup probably when the moon conjuncts Pluto in Capricorn. And then coincidentally enough, Saturn moves into Capricorn the exact same time that the moon is conjunct Pluto in Capricorn. So I feel like there's like this shift that kind of happens that might kind of kick up the dust in some way in our hearts that we'll have to move through. And Pluto issues, baby, as my friend Loda would say from our astrology group. I love him so much. Yeah, Pluto problems.
Pluto problems. Yeah, fucking Pluto. Yeah, so that would be, just for context, that would be like we'd probably be feeling that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Yeah.
The build up towards Wednesday, when we'll be feeling that the most.
Yeah, especially Tuesday, probably somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's interesting. That's the thing with aspects. It's like there's just so many considerations all at one time, which is great because that's what gives us the variety in our lives. Like there's so many different manifestations of the combo or the party of aspects that it's kind of a beautiful thing. But let's talk about these tarot cards because talk about another flavor being added upon our our cocktail here, and that is for Venus trine Uranus. I got the Emperor as the focus, and the World once again as our grounding. That World keeps showing up here in our episodes. And so there's a couple ways to approach this, I think, and to keep it real simple, it could be like so much as us expanding our horizons through order and inner authority in a way. And I know that's like Venus trine Uranus, what? But keep in mind, this aspect is happening at the same time that Saturn moves into Capricorn. We're having all this Sun Capricorn Saturn action. And there's certain bodies of planets that seem to take precedence over others, or at least in my mind, but it also depends upon your chart as well. So I think that even Saturn is getting its own flavor into our Venus Uranus tarot, asking us, because Emperor is all about inner authority and a sense of order and logical reasoning. It's like, how can I bring order out of this chaos? Which is interesting considering our world right now and maybe certain things having to do with our lives. But we need this inner authority basically to bring us towards greater fulfillment and success in our lives. And I love that the Emperor represents Aries. Like it's the card for Aries. And here we have Uranus and Aries. So it might be a lesson we've been learning for a while now. How do we take control of that situation enough to lay down a foundation in order to achieve. So Shawna, what do you think about these two cards put together?
Yeah, I think these cards are a reminder that when we maintain our own inner authority, then that's when things can really open up for us and when we can have a greater sense of freedom and accomplishment. I think that it really speaks to relying on the fact that the moon is in the sign of Capricorn when Venus trines Uranus, and how our sense of like standing in our own strength and saying, hey, like, drawing like that boundary or knowing what it is that we want and being very clear on that may be the motivator, and that when we stand in that, then that's when we can have that those surprises, and we can be ready to accept those new fun and exciting things that may come our way with the Venus Uranus energy.
Yeah. And like when we're talking about Venus, we got usually our go-tos are like relationships. How do I relate to other and share with other? And it could even be creative projects as well, because Venus has that creative energy. And so if we're talking about creative projects, like maybe this is, how do we get more organized approach around maybe the inspiration that we're having since Uranus is involved? Maybe we get totally inspired and we're like, oh my God, I've got this nebulous of inspiration. How do I make this real? How do I put some order around it? How do I bring the order through the chaos in a sense? And to tap into that Saturn principle, like taking responsibility for yourself in order to help you accomplish what you set out to achieve. So that's part of it too. And another facet about the Emperor, I guess I'll end on this, is like, if we're going to look at because not every card is like, yes, these are fabulous things. There's always something that's like, okay, you got to work on that. And so with the Emperor, with any Emperor and Aries, it kind of prefers to have its own way. And sometimes, and especially since we're talking about this trine with Uranus, which Uranus kind of likes its own way, and the fact that Chiron is square Venus and Jupiter is square the nodes, like maybe our relationships, maybe we can take a better control of our relationships or being able to express ourselves within them, just as long as we keep like certain ego feelings out of it, or like just always making it about myself, which can happen, especially when we have North nodes in Leo. This is two fire signs, it can bring up that kind of selfish consideration. So we just have to approach whatever happening, approach the bond we have with another person in a more whole way. So if you find that you're having conflict based on like wanting a certain thing your way or someone else feeling that way and you're kind of fighting for this, know that you're not going to have the fulfillment that you both truly want unless you kind of, give a little, I guess is what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, so some questions to take away for Venus trine Uranus. I would ask myself, with this lively social climate in the air, can I get out of my comfort zone to meet new people? Will I open up my own original personality just enough to be dazzled by another's? I would ask, do any of my relationships need a pick-me-up? Is it time to try some new and exciting experiences together? Or is it time to gain a little more interdependence and strike out on one's own?
Nice. I like that last one.
I know that one. I was like, ooh, am I writing for myself? And then lastly, I would ask, what big picture am I being attracted to? Are there innovative ways to approach these desires in order to bring greater joy and a sense of wholeness in my life? So. All right, Shawna. So let's talk about our final segment here and an aspect we probably have all been waiting for in some fashion. And that is Mercury, who is stationing direct. And what we are titling Last final, whatever. It's the last one. Okay, so some exacts on that. Mercury will be stationing on Friday, December 22nd at 5:51 p.m. Pacific time, which is Saturday the 23rd at 1:51 a.m. Universal time, and then 11:51 p.m. Aussie Eastern time. And it's going to station at 13 degrees Sagittarius. So Shawna, kick us in with your last quote.
So this again is by Nikita Gill, and this is A Woman's Prayer to Goddess. Persephone, grant me the foresight to know when I must let my old life start anew. Artemis, grant me the strength of your spine when you help deliver Apollo, your own twin. Athena, grant me the solidarity in your sinews for which you were born in all your armor. Aphrodite, grant me the kind of heart that always follows my passions true. Andromeda, grant me the wish to never fall out of love with the night sky or the glisten of its stars. And Hera, grant me your fury so I can remind my enemies that I am not the weakness they perceive. I am the oncoming storm. I am war. And so I thought this was really sweet. This little prayer, it reminds me of the Serenity prayer that we talked about recently. It's like this sweet little prayer, and it feels like a perfect culmination of Mercury stationing direct, because it's like, okay, we've gathered all of the things. We've gathered all of the reflection and all of the information and little things that have come up along the past few weeks. And now we are much wiser, hopefully. And I think with this Mercury retrograde in particular, that will have gleaned a lot of insight, because like you and I have talked about, Mel, this particular Mercury retrograde seems to be wrapping up a lot of what we've been processing through in past retrogrades and just this past year. It's very much tied to the Saturn cycle. And so I think there's a certain element of wisdom that we're taking with us from this stationing of Mercury direct.
Yes, I don't think you could be more spot on, Shawna. That's exactly what's really happening here. And the whole and why it's kind of why am I actually grateful that it happened during Sagittarius, because we don't think about how important these things are in our lives, such as, just even questioning our own beliefs and, how well we've incorporated certain pieces of wisdom that have come to us, especially this year. Because I know this year has been trying for a lot of people. There's been a lot of changes internally from person to person, and there's just been changes on, you know, a global perspective that have ramped up. And so we're just all trying to get a grip right now, basically. And how we perceive our world, which is exactly Mercury's function. You know, it like observes things, it transfers information, and that's pretty much its function. And if that is not functioning, you know, I forget how I was going to say something, but I don't remember. I need no more podcasts until Mercury goes direct for me. Oh my God. Oh my God. So, yeah, I totally forgot what I was saying there. Funny. I was thinking, Shawna, while we're talking about Mercury, and just a little tidbit for our listeners who might not know is that certain planets have different speeds. Like right now, you know, the fact that Mercury will be stationing direct means it gets really slow and it gets really potent. But it also is so potent that things don't really kind of fire off quite the way we might intend it to. And so even in your own chart, you can kind of look to where your Mercury is and look at its speed. And this is something, you know, Shawna and I can help you with, or, you know, what have you. If it's in retrograde, you know that it's retrograde. But like me, I had no idea that I had a slow Mercury until I learned about, you know, planetary speeds and how that really affects things. And I think you have a fast Mercury, Shawna. And
I do. Yeah.
Like Shawna just comes in and just like, she's like, she'll say everything I'm trying to say. And it's just like eloquent, you know, just straightforward. It's just like perfectly lined out. And here I am with my slow Mercury, which makes me a great writer. But when I have to like transfer the information, you know, it all comes out like a big jumble. Like I just can't process things as fastly and as concisely sometimes. And so it just reminded me of that in my flabbergast as I was trying to get my idea out. But what the purpose of me saying that is that's kind of ties in the whole Mercury retrograde cycle. You know, the only reason I have a slow Mercury is because Mercury retrogrades. Mercury was about to retrograde right before I was born. Like 4 days or something before I was born or something like that. And so you can see like the impact of the speed and its direction. And so to get us back to, you know, the fact that it's stationing direct here in Sagittarius, we just spent all that time, you know, like as Shawna was saying, revising certain things and hopefully implementing the wisdom that we've gained, not only in the last couple months, but this year in general, or perhaps our whole lives. You know, it's a culmination of experience essentially. And so in its slow time, you know, it's most potent. So as it stations and we're doing our celebration dance, just know that it's still just as potent as it was when it was going retrograde. So we're not necessarily out of the woods yet. I think that we get out of Mercury's shadow on January 10th, I want to say, is when we approach that, because it went retrograde at 29 degrees, right, Shawna?
Mm-hmm. Yep, 29 degrees Sagittarius. It went retrograde on December 3rd.
Yeah, so basically it's going to get out of its shadow phase around the 10th and move right into another sign. It's like not only do we complete this Mercury retrograde, but we just move into a whole nother mental awareness that is really going to be getting on board with, you know, that Capricorn sun and that newly fresh Saturn in Capricorn. I got used to saying Saturn and Sagittarius for so long. How am I going to retrain my brain?
Yep. Yeah. Well, and it's funny, Mel, too, because like we've talked about in the last few podcasts, the earlier Mercury retrogrades that we had this year, we had one in spring and then one in summer. They were kind of intense. Like they were, shit was kind of crazy. Especially this last one that it went over the eclipse point. And so it, to me, at least just in my personal experience, and then people that I've talked to as well, this particular retrograde that we're stationing, it definitely feels like more tame. And it also feels like we're just making sense of everything that happened this year. There's a lot to process. And like you're saying, it's not like I don't think that we'll feel as though we have it all figured out or we have all the answers. Now, I think that when Mercury stations on, let's see, what day did we say this was on? On Friday, Saturday.
Friday the 22nd.
Yeah.
Saturday, depending on where you are.
Depending on where you are. So I think we'll feel like this sense of, like a sense of clarity, maybe even a sense of determination, a sense of knowing. It doesn't mean that we'll have all of the details lined out. I mean, Mercury is in the sign of Sagittarius, which is more about the big picture anyways, like we've talked about. But it is like, I think that we're going to be like, okay, I know what I got to do. I'm going to go forward and I'm going to figure it out. Like there's this sense of the haze being lifted, so to speak.
Yeah, I like that, because I think the whole purpose of this, as we go back over, because basically this Mercury retrograde was not only having us process this year, it was having us process essentially the whole Saturn cycle that happened in Sagittarius, because it was revisiting all those Sag ideas, like, and chances are we have spent this whole Mercury retrograde maybe revising, obviously the big picture, but revising our own beliefs about who we are, what we're here to do, how capable we are in order to do it, how we feel about other people, all these things, especially as we were having our Sag party where all the planets were in Sag. And so I think the stationing is really allowing us to just mentally be more confident about our big picture and being able to implement new beliefs into action as we go forward. Because, Sagittarius is here to provide the optimism for the future. So chances are that optimism might rush in at this time and you're like, okay, I've got these innovative insights as we've done all this kind of like Uranus contact, especially with Mercury. We're tapping into that confidence and optimism. Hopefully our lessons have been integrated and we're more in tune with our own life's philosophy in some way. And so depending on where this lies in your chart is kind of what the area of life you're going to move forward in. So I think it's going to be a very positive thing that is going to get our mind on board, and more so than it's ever been. Like all this processing, it will have been for a reason. And so what I find interesting, Shawna, is that the moon that day, when Mercury stations, the moon is going to be in Aquarius, and it's actually going to be in a harmonious sextile with Uranus and Venus, who we were just talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, so I feel like the station is really tapping into some of that energy too, because the moon will be talking to those planets as we are, about to move forward in a way.
Yeah, that feels just like an added bit of support as far as that confidence level, like you're talking about, Mel, like where we're like, yeah, I can do this. I'm cool. I got this.
I got this. Oh, because it takes a little bit of optimism. Some people like scoff at optimism, like you're not being real, or you're not, like how can you know? But the thing is if you're not optimistic about your situation, then how are you ever going to find yourself in a greater place of joy? Because you're going to be stuck in the same pattern of thinking that and that here we are stuck in the same pattern, aka is the same as stuck in the same belief. So this is what we've been changing the whole time. This has been the lesson of Saturn and Sagittarius. If there's anything to take away as Saturn moves into Capricorn and Mercury stations in Sagittarius, revisiting all these things, is that it is very much about how we view things in life and what our beliefs are. And some people are like, I believe in God and this and that. And they think that beliefs are associated with these bigger principles. But beliefs are as the same as like, I won't go down to the store past 7 because someone is going to attack me. It's the same thing. It's either these small pictures or these big pictures. But either way, how we process and how our Mercury even functions is all tapped into these ideas of belief. And if our beliefs are working for us or working against us. And so I think that this retrograde in Sagittarius has really tapped in to these facets of ourselves, and hopefully has allowed us to move into greater pastures and beyond self-limiting beliefs.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Mel. There's the macro beliefs, like the big picture, the believing in something that's greater than yourself, but there's also the micro stuff, like you know, if I cancel plans at the last minute, that means I'm a bad person, or you know, whatever, like little stuff like that. And those things, they're tiny, but they have a very big impact on our life, on our health, on our lifestyle. And so, yeah, I think that's important to consider, that we're shifting all of the things, not just the big picture stuff.
Yes, because all those little things help to make up the big picture, and you know, it's all part of our lives here. And that's the whole idea of Sagittarius too. Is it's you know, it's the sign that allows us to move forward, not only with greater optimism, but allowing ourselves to expand our own horizons and what we've experienced in our lives by basically being optimistic to try new things. So I think that, and just, you know, when Mercury stations, it doesn't mean all the processing has done. If anything, these are the days, you know, like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and through the weekend, these are the days where we might get those, especially with some Uranus action, we might get these, you know, very valuable insights to actually really solidify the whole retrograde process that we just went through. So don't think all the processing is done yet. This is actually a very potent time to continue that work and maybe get some last key insights that will lead us into, you know, where we're going next.
Definitely.
So, all right, so let's talk about these tarot cards, because I think they really reinforce kind of what we're saying here. And so for Mercury stationing direct, I drew the 3 of Wands as the focus and the 5 of Wands as the grounding. And there's a couple different ways to look at it, but I feel like, you know, we've all been through some setbacks in a way, especially this year. And I feel that now we can really look forward to the future with optimism and, most importantly, strategy, because the 3 of Wands is all about the power of foresight and how to have you know, a greater idea of the big picture and to really plan out our visions and take the cue into our next direction, because it's kind of got this adventurous spirit, much like Sagittarius. Like really, Sagittarius and the 3 of Wands was speaking to me at the same time here, because it has that adventurous quality to it, but it's also not about taking any real risks. So it's like, how can we be adventurous? How can we infuse optimism, even though we've been through a lot of stress probably over the last how many months, and really just get a solid plan and a solid picture in place, so that we can move forward with confidence without really taking any, you know, calculated risks is what we're taking, I guess is what I'm saying. So Shawna, what do you think about these 2 cards together?
Yeah, these to me definitely speak about strategy and how can we strategize, how can we stay focused, and like all of this to me is like, okay, how do we stay focused on the big picture, what's really important, and not get distracted by bullshit that doesn't matter?
Yeah.
To be frank.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Oh, you know, because that 5 of Wands, it's a tricky card. It's a lot of times we're being challenged with our own goals, in a sense, when the 5 of Wands appears. And it could be something that's challenged within us, or, you know, where we're feeling like scattered and like just not able to focus, or a little bit lost in our lives in some way. Or sometimes that conflict comes from without, and we're actually in competition with other people, or other people don't support our goals, or you're in a joint goal with someone, but, you know, going in opposite directions, you know, that kind of thing. So you know, what's interesting about that, you know, how maybe some of our plans might not jive with others. It could also be like, say you're putting together some plans, say you have a business, and you're trying to focus on how you can get ahead of the competition. Like, this is a perfect combination for that sort of thing. Like, all right, I'm going to envision this thing, I'm going to get it all out in the open. I've got some great ideas. I'm not going to take any real risks, but I really need to plan a little bit better so that I can get ahead of any type of competition that might be out there. Because That's the nature of business. So, and we're about to get to business because we're all going into Capricorn here. And so I found that, that could be something too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's like, and what comes to mind too is when you say that, Mel, is I was watching randomly. I follow this guy on Instagram. Have you heard of Gary Vee? He's like a marketing person, and he gained a lot of notoriety because he was very active on social media. And one of his things is he's like, listen, like, don't worry about what everyone else is doing. Like, yes, be strategic, but don't worry about how many people are paying attention to what your competitors are doing. Worry about the content that you're creating. Make sure that you're always providing value to the people that you care about. And I think that we can apply that to business and then just to life in general. Like, don't worry about keeping up with the Joneses, so to speak. Worry about your own life and what you're doing, and to keep the strategy there versus getting distracted by what everyone else is doing.
Yeah, I love it. It's so true, because we're just trying to, and that's the main card here. The main card is the Three of Wands. And this card is also really about a new perspective. It's like, if you look at the card, it's usually a man with three wands. He's looking out over this vast landscape, and he's clearly about to embark upon something. And so I really feel like, in true Mercury style, we're embarking upon a new journey, Sagittarius, with a new perspective, Mercury. And so I'm hoping that we're going to be moving away from any stress we were originally feeling, or that sense of competition, like we were just saying, like always comparing ourselves to another person rather than focusing on the content, like you were just saying, Shawna. Like, don't focus on the competition. Just, who are you? What are you sharing? Like, put your oomph into that. And so I feel like we're going to be coming out of these conflicts and some of the chaos that might have been around us, to really focus on these next steps, because it's all about focusing on the next steps, and that's where the plan comes in. And so because of that, I think we just kind of know where we stand now. I think we just kind of know a little bit more about who we are, where we stand, what we'll stand for, and then just go forward from there. Because if we've had frustrating circumstances, I think this is the time where we can envision our way out. This is our jailbreak. Essentially.
Definitely. I agree.
So, yeah. All right. So some questions to take away with Mercury stationing. I would ask myself, now that I've had the last 3 weeks to review my personal philosophy and belief systems, what valuable insight did I gain into my own inner workings? Can I go forward putting a revised version into place? I would ask, what is my mental attitude regarding the big picture? Can I take my visions and put them into form by remaining open-minded? Can I start upon a new journey with an optimistic outlook in place? And then lastly, I would ask, can I take this prime station time to put together a list of experiences I envision for my future? What do I imagine 2018 to look like for me?
Nice.
And so, kind of an action item, not really. Just think about it. You go where you want to with that. So you do what you will. So Shawna, what have we learned? Oh my God. So much. Well, we learned that the Sun and Saturn are going to move into Capricorn, which will bring us not only our solstice, which is winter or summer, depending on where you are in the world, but is also going to bring us the conjunction and the start of a new cycle, a Sun-Saturn cycle. And so we can go forward now knowing that the work now begins. And so we learned that Venus is going to trine Uranus and could bring some wild encounters into our lives. So we might be trying some new ways of relating, or moving past old hurts in a way, or just getting out there and being more social and meeting new people in our lives, and letting our freak flag fly in a sense. And then lastly, we learned that Mercury is stationing direct finally. And this is the last stop. This is the last stop of this year, pretty much. And we are now here and we're ready to move forward with our big picture and our revised belief and personal philosophies. So Shawna, I know you have an excellent action item for our folks to take away. So please share.
Yeah, I do. So I think you read my mind a little bit.
Oh my God.
my action item is I want us to make a Mercury retrograde list. So I find that each Mercury retrograde period is a little bit different. And this is because of, like we've talked about, it has different connections that it makes, but then also it has different connections that it makes in every single person's chart. So this Mercury retrograde is going to be different for each person individually versus the previous one versus the future one. And so to help us wrap things up and really and just really process and make the most of it, is I want us to write down a list of all of the things, like all of the little like challenges or like quirks or, where things have kind of like popped up unexpectedly during this particular Mercury retrograde process. And these may be big things, they may be little things. But I want you to write down like as many little things that you've noticed. So this period would be from, if we're looking at the exact retrograde, from December 3rd until December 22nd. And so, what's happened? Like, where have you had miscommunications or mix-ups or plans changed or whatever the case may be? And then notice if there's a theme there. Like, is there, and maybe there is, maybe there isn't, I don't know, but is there something that, like, where each thing seems to be related to something that you're doing or something that happens? And you may make a connection as to what that means for you. Maybe not. Maybe you just notice a theme. So that feels important to do during this particular Mercury retrograde process.
I totally agree, Shawna, because I think that we can actually take a lot away, more so than normal Mercury retrogrades. So a list would definitely be helpful because sometimes we don't even realize the things that we've encountered or learned until we get it down on paper and we're like,
yes,
there's a pattern here.
There's a pattern to the madness.
Yes, there is. So if any of you doing the action item, comment, tag, let us know. What's your list look like? What are you going through? 'Cause we're always interested in what our peeps are doing.
Yeah, it's always nice to hear how people actually experience things, because that to me, like, I love hearing the stories. I don't know why, but that just it helps me learn, and I find it fascinating as well.
Yeah, I agree. So.
Yep. So that is your action item for this week. And of course, another way to get involved is to become a patron of the podcast to show your appreciation and to get those super cool show notes. So you can become a patron by going to feminineprinciplepodcast.podbean.com.
Yes. And you can find that information, I think, on our Facebook and Instagram as well, too, at Feminine Principle Podcast. So there's so many ways you can get to the patronship. And we're always we've actually got a couple things in line for the new year that we're working on. So just be on the lookout for that. And just also a quick note that we will be doing that Facebook Live. This will be our 4th installment, I think, right, Shawna? This will be number 4.
Yep.
So we're going to be back on Friday, December 29th at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. So we're just going to, bring out this year and welcome the new year in and just kind of chat about it all. So we'd love to have you come on down and take part in the broadcast. So once again, that's Friday the 29th at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time.
Definitely.
So, all right. So just a quick note of where, if you need to find us individually, you can find me at energeticprinciples.com. And you can also find me on Facebook and Instagram at Energetic Principles. So Shawna, where can they find you?
Yeah. Before I tell them that, Mel, do you have anything that you're working on that you want to share?
Not at the moment. I am taking the holiday, and hopefully I'll be back in the new year with some new events going on.
Okay, cool. Resting up. You did a lot.
I know. I'm tired, girl. I'm tired.
Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah. So then you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook under Neo Feminine Astrology. And then, of course, one thing that I've been promoting that I'm really excited about is my 2018 Moon Journal. And so you can find out more about that on any of those outlets. And I'm selling that on Etsy. But then I'll actually be at a few different events, throughout the course of the rest of the year. I'll have information about that on my Instagram page as well.
Yes. And what better time of year to have an event than the end of the year or the beginning of the next year, because we're all like kind of primed to, with that fresh perspective just coming off of Mercury retrograde. So this is a great time of year to engage with others and get out there for stuff like this. So,
Yep.
And yes, Moon Journal. Great gift item. I know we're getting close. We're getting close, but hey, you've heard of belated gifts. And I'm sure there's some Capricorns in your life that will be having birthdays soon. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right. So Shawna, any last words for our listeners?
Yeah, sending lots of love and asking that if you enjoy this podcast, definitely leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or on Facebook. And thank you to those who have done so. We appreciate that so much. It's so wonderful to see your words and to know that you appreciate the podcast.
Absolutely. We couldn't thank you more. We just are so grateful. And for the ones that we've gotten, I'm surprised how many, and they're all, I don't know if it's just because we're telling you 5 stars, but we are very, very, very grateful for the rating, because it really does help. So, and just so you know, with those who subscribe to future episodes, they come out every weekend on Sundays at midnight Pacific time. So once you sign up, and that's all good to go, I think they just automatically download. So you can just expect them on Sunday morning to be ready for some listening. So, yeah. All right, everybody. Well, it's been a wonderful year. We're not quite there yet. I think we have one more episode before that. But
Not yet.
Not yet. I'm already feeling it. I'm like, is this year over? It's wonderful. All right. Well, sending everybody lots of love and wishing you a wonderful week. So we thank you so much for tuning in. Until next time, may the stars be with you.
Namaste.